Welcome. Where are you from in Illinois?
We're from near Champaign, University
Okay.
of Illinois area.
Yeah. Well, I'm Tim Moore from the University of Wisconsin. So go Badgers. Well, welcome. It's great to be with you, and congratulations on getting to the national finals. Like I said, I'm Tim Moore from the Center for the Study of the American Constitution at the University of Wisconsin, and my colleagues are.
My name is Susan Farson. I'm a retired patent attorney from Fort Wayne, and my grandfather grew up in Tuscola, Illinois. So I'm not sure where exactly you are near Champaign, but.
My name is Lester Brooks. I teach in the history department at Anne Arundel Community College in Arnold, Maryland.
And you are?
My name's Evan Schmitz. I'm going to study electrical engineering at the U of I next year.
I'm
Garen,
sorry,
yeah,
Garen, we can't hear you there.
Sorry, can you hear me
That's
now?
all right.
My name's Garen Meeker. I plan to study political science at Millikan.
Hi, my name is Gunnar Olson, and I am planning on attending Eastern Illinois University in the fall to study broadcast journalism.
Great. And your teacher is?
I'm Marshall Schacht, and welcome to St Joseph-Ogden High School.
It's great to be with you guys. And Garen, you might want to talk a little louder. I think in the introductions it was a little soft, but we decided on question one, if that's all right with you. Well, actually, it's going to have to be, but I'll read it and then you can begin. What were the major disagreements amongst the 55 delegates at the during the Constitutional Convention in Philadelphia, and how were they resolved? What issues, if any, were not resolved, and what were the consequences? What changes, if any, should be made to the Constitution? You may begin.
The disagreements argued at the Constitutional Convention over the weaknesses founded in the Articles of Confederation were significant for our young country. The most significant argument was whether the delegates should replace or revise the Articles of the Confederation. Hamilton argues in Federalist 15 that with a new constitution comes the benefit of raising men and money for a country as a whole. The government could also make a currency to tax citizens to fund the military, which is proven essential in Hamilton's Federalist 16 and 24. There was a bit of pushback on this part of forming the new constitution because people were scared of an army controlled by the government. With these issues on the table, decisions needed to be made.
At the convention were still not resolved upon leaving the room. For example, most delegates agreed that to gain more Southern support, the issue of slavery would have to be generally ignored as addressed in Madison's Federalist 42. Similarly, the Constitution barely represents the rights of Native Americans. The Constitution did not prohibit Americans from taking Native American land. Native Americans were not considered citizens either until 1924. This neglect to clarify moral questions presented at the convention left the questions to be resolved on their own. One final issue was disregarded at the convention was the inclusion of the Bill of Rights. Although some delegates at the convention, such as George Mason, spoke in favor of the bill, he was heavily voted against. A few months later, however, delegates again pushed for the Bill of Rights under pressure by anti-federalists.
After the convention was concluded, the North and South were unable to find a common ground in regards to slavery, and the Civil War was fought. As a result of the Savage Agreement, many African Americans still have to face horrible racism to this day. Likewise, the infringement on Native American land was not abolished until the 1934 Indian Reorganization Act was passed relatively recently. Because of the inability of the Constitution to decide on these issues, basic human rights were and still are violated daily, and we look back as a country on the abuses that tarnish our history.
The Constitution is a timeless document that is meant to be changed as our country grows, though there are many rights that are neglected to be clearly stated in the Constitution that present clear issues in today's society. Founders wanted to leave many rights up to the states, one being the right to vote. It is a pinnacle belief in American democracy that everyone has a right to vote, but it is never clearly stated in the Constitution. While states have created biased laws and attempts to restrict the rights of voters. Instead of addressing one's right to vote, the Constitution outlines the few limitations to voting rights. Found in the 15th, which implies people cannot be denied the right to vote based on their ethnicity. The 19th implies the same, but instead sex. The 24th, which describes poll taxation, and the 26th, which adds an age requirement to be eligible to vote. Voting is a negative right that has been ignored by the government and has been poorly treated as a positive right, allowing for states to create biased laws that vary.
Currently, 43 out of the 50 states have representatives trying to pass voter suppression laws, which can limit early voting, impose strict voter ID laws, and make it harder for people to make it to their designated voting place. These new laws can restrict one's right to vote further than stated in the Constitution, which makes it necessary for an amendment needed to be added to ensure one's right to vote. Further requirements should also be thought upon, such as convicted felons' right to vote, early voting places, and improper gerrymandering that occurs from state to state. The founders intentionally left out the one's right to vote, which at the time seemed as though it was the best option. But now, without the right stated in the Constitution, we see greater problems arising.
All in all, there are many disagreements at the Constitutional Convention, such as the legality of slavery, infringement of Native American land, and a Bill of Rights. Many of these issues were not fairly addressed or satisfied at the convention. To this day, there are still changes that need to be made, such as addressing citizens and felons' right to vote. However, there are also many other changes that need to be made to improve America's future. Thank you.
Well, let me start out. To what extent was representation an issue at the convention?
I mean, at the convention, there were not many anti-federalists were present, as a lot of them, such as Rhode Island, didn't attend because they didn't want the convention or the Constitution to be passed because you needed a 13 out of 13 to pass it. So I think anti-federalist representation was not as present as it needed to be.
And to add on to his point, even the anti-federalists that were there, some of them even walked out of the room at the end of it. So they were not clearly and as represented as the Federalists were.
Let me ask about, you talked about the Bill of Rights. What was the problem there? I mean, why any controversy over a Bill of Rights at the convention?
I mean, many of the Federalists considered the Constitution to be a Bill of Rights, as discussed in Federalist 84. Because of so everything in the Constitution is positive rights. It grants powers to the government, and therefore it limits them from going further than those expressed rights. So I think just that idea that the Constitution could be a Bill of Rights kind of encouraged Federalists that they didn't need to include one.
Was there anything in the Constitution as they were discussing that would have let more individuals suggest that, yes, there is a need for specific rights that should be outlined and protected?
I mean, the elastic clause was one thing that worried a lot of anti-federalists, that Congress could overstep their boundaries in times of war and other critical times. I think that's one of the main clauses that worried anti-federalists the most.
Add on to Evan's point, I think a lot of them were fearful that they would have a tyrannical government again, like they had to deal with the monarchy, and so they wanted a Bill of Rights to protect their basic rights.
Going on that, during the convention, there was a lot of debate over the executive and the executive power. Do you think that worked out? That they finally came up with in the Constitution? The question of executive power was heavily debated during the convention. Do you agree with their final decision in the Constitution?
I think so. In order to have a strong country, you really need one central leader. Whenever you have a bunch of individual states, then those leaders might not necessarily agree with each other, and therefore they can't work together as well as one central figure can.
And adding on to Evan's point, you need a strong figure, but they put in checks and balances into the Constitution to be able to make sure that they didn't become a tyrannical government.
Let's deal with that issue of citizenship. Okay, have we fixed the problem with citizenship? Has that problem been fixed once and for all? And why has it taken so long?
Native American citizenship, because that's what some
Can you speak up, Garen?
Yeah.
I can't hear you.
I'm sorry. So I think the main issue with like Native American citizenship, I think it was very hard to address because we basically committed genocide and took their land and killed many of their people. And how do you address a problem when you're the one who created it? So I don't think we've completely solved it because obviously we've given them citizenship, but we put them on reservations that aren't the best. They don't have the best facilities. And I think we need to improve them and further make them better than just handing them citizenship and putting them on reservations.
Do we need an equal rights amendment?
I believe so, most definitely, to protect everyone.
Okay. All right.
I'd like to ask a question about back to the convention. They were sent there to, they weren't sent there to write a new constitution. So should we be critical of them for not doing what they were supposed to do?
I don't think we should necessarily be critical of them because the entire time they were working in the best interest of the country. Federalist number 40 talks about how because they were working in the best interest of the country, 9 colonies voting for the new constitution out of 13 is satisfactory. So I think just the idea that they, like, while they may not have, that may not have been their original goal, I think it was definitely their goal once the convention started because they realized it was necessary.
Also, about being critical on them, we're still a country to this day, so whatever they did in that room was at least good enough to keep us around this long.
Okay. The original at the convention, one of the original were term limits for members of Congress or what would become Congress. Do you agree or disagree with that? You think we should have had term limits?
I think term limits can be very helpful because they do allow for more people to be filtered in, because if you do have representatives or senators who are constantly reelected, it doesn't allow for new voices and new opinions.
How long would it take for a representative to learn their position?
Well, I would say it takes about a year for a representative to even get in and kind of like know everything, because they do have 2 years and they're reelected then. So I think if we establish term limits, it'll let them become more knowledgeable and know how Congress is run.
Should we lengthen in the House of Representatives, lengthen the term so that an individual learns the position and then can be effective?
I don't necessarily think so, because if we extend the term, then we don't get new voices in and out of the House of Representatives as fast, and that is really the sole purpose of the House, that we get new opinions in there as quickly as we can. So even though the term is so short, it's a necessary sacrifice.
I'd like to ask another question about the convention. Would you, what do you think about secrecy? I mean, they basically shut the windows and everybody took an oath to not to blab. Was that a good decision?
I don't think it was the best decision because you're basically swearing yourself to secrecy and then basically giving everyone in your country an excuse not to trust you.
Was there any reason that for it? I mean, legitimate reason for it?
Federalist 55, they did warn that if there was too few like representatives, then conspiracies would arise. So it's kind of counterproductive. Can I finish my statement, please? It's kind of counterproductive for them to be so secret when they could establish conspiracies themselves.
Thank you. We'll give you some of our thoughts. Anybody else want to start? I mean, I can start, or Lester, Susan. What do you want to do?
Well, I'll start off. I liked your introduction. You hit on the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation, and certainly that started the ball rolling. And you talked about the question, is it to be amended or revised? You also brought up the currency issue, the citizenship issue, Bill of Rights. I like the idea that you helped each other out. Sometimes you would continue the conversation. Your answer about a necessary sacrifice with regard to term limits was very interesting, because we have to balance that. What do we do with term limits? So in that sense, I thought it was very effective how you were thinking about that issue and explaining that issue. So good job.
I also thought you did a nice job bringing things out. One thing you mentioned, the problem with not having an army, or they were really afraid of having an army. And some of those issues, but you really knew your Federalist Papers quite well, and were able to recite from them and use it well to support your arguments. So I thought you did a nice job, and I enjoyed it. I was going to say, one thing I was trying to get to, though, is on the presidential power I would have liked to have heard a little bit more in your presentation on the presidency, because that's been an ongoing problem for years or more. So, but otherwise, nice job.
Yeah, I think one of the things that I think really stands out is you really really understand the ignoring of Native Americans being included within the discussion. There was a substantive part of your 4-minute presentation on that. So I thought that was a strength. And I think also you're mentioning some of the other issues that were, and Susan's already referenced the issue of the struggle about how would a militia or a national army function in the new country. So I think those were strong points. I would suggest, however, you might want to spend a bit more time thinking about the representation issue, like the Virginia plan, New Jersey plan. I mean, in the middle of the summer, it almost fell apart in Philadelphia over that issue. So that would be one suggestion that I would recommend for your consideration. And but on the whole, I thought you had a reasonably decent understanding of how contentious it was at Philadelphia. So I enjoyed the time that we've spent together. Thank you.
Thank you, judges.
Thank you.